Hey, good afternoon to you. 506 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. You know, there was this, I do want to mention the breaking news. It is ongoing. There's a manhunt underway in Maine after 18 people, at least 18 people were killed last night in a shooting there in Lewiston, Maine. The suspect's name is Robert Card. He's at large. It took place in two different locations, a bowling alley. They say where a children's league was taking place in a local bar. As soon as I saw it was Lewiston, Maine last night, I did think to myself, oh no, I wonder to what extent the media is taking hold of this, because Lewiston, Maine has a very high Somali population up there. And I don't know anything about the victims at this point, who they were. They showed an image. The suspect is a white guy, so never put it past the press to turn this into a racial thing, including if it isn't. We don't actually know at this moment, but it's got to be heartbreaking and just so scary right now to have been a resident up there, especially one of those local businesses trying to kind of lock your doors and lock down as he moved from location to location and apparently killed so many and injured so many others. So if we have any updates on that story before the conclusion of our program today, we'll share them with you. But at least 18 have been killed. There's a massive manhunt going underway right now. He is said to be an Army Reserves sergeant, Robert Card. Meanwhile, we've got a full-blown war going on between Israel and Hamas and really Iran right now in the Middle East. And there's a lot of world powers who have touch points here, including the United States in supporting Israel, of course. But additionally, you've got China that has been buying tremendous amounts of Iranian fuel and thus fueling the terror attacks that Iran sponsors. For more on this, I want to bring in Gordon Chang. He's the author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War. You can find him on X, formerly Twitter, at Gordon G. Chang. Sir, good to have you back with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vince.
Give us the broad overview of China's role in what we're seeing play out right now in the Middle East.
Well, China has always tried to play both sides, Palestinian and Israeli. But when push came to shove this month, it certainly came down on the side of Hamas, on the side of brutality and the atrocities. And that's because Beijing has a couple of reasons. First of all, it believes that it has a greater audience in what they call the global south if they are on the side of the Palestinians. And as you point out, China has had a long and durable relationship with Iran, buying large amounts of sanctioned Iranian oil. I can understand China's position on this, but the thing of buying oil as cheaply as it can.
Yes.
But the point is, we've known about these sanctioned oil sales. There are sanctions, and we have purposefully turned our back, and not just this administration. So this is up to us. We can stop this if we have the political will, and we haven't. But also, you got to remember that China is trying to promote chaos in the world. Xi Jinping is a Maoist, and Mao said that chaos would facilitate worldwide Chinese rule. So that's the bigger story here.
So how badly, you're kind of getting at answering my question then here, how badly does China want the United States to be drawn into a full-on war with Hamas and maybe more broadly Iran?
I think they certainly would like us to divert resources to the Middle East, but I believe that we have to do so. I know a lot of people say, look, we shouldn't support Ukraine. We should be diverting our resources to East Asia because China is the main enemy, and China is the main enemy. But the way you deal with the main enemy is to take down its proxies, Russia, Iran, and others. Because if you do that, you isolate China. Plus also, if you allow China's proxies to get victories, that creates an aura of invincibility for China. And that's certainly not good. And of course, if we allow the Russians and the Iranians to succeed, that means China and Russia will be able to divert resources to a war in East Asia. So for many reasons, we have to deal with the world as it is. The world was peaceful under Trump. Trump made it very clear from the beginning of his administration that he wasn't going to put up with any of this. If you remember, April 2017 at Mar-a-Lago over that beautiful chocolate cake, Xi Jinping was next to Trump. Trump stood up and announced that he had just launched a missile attack on a Chinese proxy, this one in Syria. And after that, Xi Jinping was really quiet for 4 years because I think that he was scared of the United States. We know that Xi Jinping is not scared of the present occupant of the Oval Office.
Yes. I'm going to talk more about Xi Jinping with you in a moment. I have a lot more questions about him. But you mentioned these proxies, these countries that work on behalf of, or at least at the very least with China to advance their own interests. And one of the things that you and I have talked about before is these joint military exercises that China has been conducting with Russia and Iran. How important are these? How these seem like they kind of fly under the radar, but they do seem like important engagements.
Well, they are, because China and Iran and North Korea and Russia
yes,
are practicing joint exercise, practicing for war. And to make this even worse, when Kim Jong-un of North Korea went to Vladivostok to meet Putin last month, Russia announced for the first time ever that there would be joint naval exercises among Russia, China, and North Korea. We can expect that there's a war in East Asia that China launches, whether Taiwan or the Philippines or whatever. We can expect North Korea to attack South Korea. We might even expect Russia to move against Japan to take control of the northern islands of the Japanese archipelago. And this is, basically worldwide war. So we better stop this right now because it's getting out of hand.
On Xi Jinping, yesterday, California Governor Gavin Newsom appeared in Beijing. And the way that the media understood yesterday's meeting, they said it was kind of a last-second decision whether or not Xi Jinping would actually meet with Governor Newsom. The two men did meet, and they had a conversation of some kind. You had Gavin Newsom claiming that it was very nice and cordial and constructive, and they're working together on bilateral relations and trying to stop the fentanyl flow. What was in that meeting for Xi Jinping? What did he get out of meeting with a top Democrat governor?
First of all, he's probably thinking that Gavin Newsom might be the next president of the United States. He also got Gavin Newsom to adopt China's view of China-U.S. relations, this mutuality, mutual respect, cooperation. This is something that the Biden administration has refused to do, and quite rightly. But Gavin Newsom, not knowing what he's doing, did that. This trip of the California governor, I think, did not help his presidential chances because, he was there test driving a Chinese electric vehicle. In other words, promoting Chinese cars over American cars.
Yes, he was.
Whatever you think of EVs, it was just wrong to help China sell more of its cars over American competitors like Tesla.
Well, didn't Tesla just move its plant out of California and into Texas? Like, why would the California governor be trying to stoke Chinese electric cars?
Because Gavin Newsom is an idiot. I don't know what else I could say on that. I mean, one could maybe use other terms, but the point is that Gavin Newsom is less able to conduct American foreign policy than he is to govern California.
Yeah, greasy little moron, that guy. All right, so China's got all of these ambitions for its growth and our decline. What do you think happens next? I mean, how soon, how imminent is Chinese military action on something big like a Taiwan or the Philippines, like you just mentioned?
Yeah, I think that the Chinese military understands now that Taiwan is too hard a target. And besides, China's probably not going to move before Taiwan's presidential election, which is January of next year. Really doesn't make sense. But on Sunday, two Chinese vessels rammed two Philippine boats in an escalation. This came as the State Department has been warning in writing that the United States is prepared to use force to discharge its obligations under the U.S.-Philippine Mutual Defense Treaty. And just yesterday, in prepared remarks, his initial remarks, as he greeted Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese at the White House, Biden said that the U.S. would discharge its mutual defense obligations with the Philippines. In other words, telling China that we were prepared to go to war. And that was good on the president for doing that. But, right now we're at a critical moment. That word gets overused, but it's a critical moment, Vince, because if China does not heed President Biden's warnings, it means we can no longer deter China, which means we are going to war soon.
Now, I'm all into sending strong messages as a way to maintain peace, but one of the things I'm concerned about is that we are stretching ourselves so thin that we won't be prepared for a China conflict. Right now we're watching as, for instance, 155 millimeter howitzer rounds are being sent back and forth from Ukraine to Israel because we just don't have the supply to actually keep all of this moving. Don't you think that the growing conditions of American conflict in both of those countries increase the likeliness of Chinese aggression?
Absolutely. And we are not prepared to deal with the world. We've got a war in Ukraine. We have insurgencies across North Africa that look like wars. There's the October 7th war in Israel. The State Department a week ago warned that Azerbaijan and Armenia may go to war.
Yes.
That doesn't have to do with China, but the point is international order and peace and stability are dissolving, and countries think that they can then engage in conflict because they can get away with it. This is World War III. And I think, you go back to World War II. It wasn't World War II in the beginning. It was a lot of miscellaneous conflicts that merged into a global war. That's exactly what's happening right now. And the Biden administration has presided over 2 years of disastrous foreign policy.
Yeah.
The world was peaceful and stable when Trump was in office. Now we're on the verge of global conflict.
I know. And remember all the predictions. I think Donald Trump Jr. posted something to this effect this week. Remember all the predictions that if Donald Trump becomes president, we'll go into World War III and the economy will collapse. It sure looks like it was actually his successor that is leading to those outcomes, unfortunately. Gordon Chang, thank you very much. Always nice to talk to you, and people can find you on Twitter, on X, at Gordon G. Chang. Thank you, sir. Let's take a call. We've got Ryan calling in from Strasburg, line 3. Ryan, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. Hope you're doing well. I got a slight prediction, and let me base it off of this. We all know, without a doubt, Joe Biden is a weak leader.
Right.
We all know that he does not have it in him to make accurate strategic military decisions. I'm predicting that if China and some of the others are going to start anything, it will be sometime next year, just before the elections, because our enemies know everything about Joe Biden, and they also know that we have a history of re-electing the incumbent president when there are conflicts.
Yeah, a bit of a wag the dog situation, right? You get you just use a war to distract from all of his domestic failures. I've said on this program before that, Biden's marks on literally every category are rock bottom. And the only way out of this, if you were going to smash in case of emergency, is sometimes going into war in an effort to try and draw the American public's support for an existential foreign conflict. And I don't know what side this will start at, Ryan, if it's the United States launching it or them, but one way or the other, they have incentives to take us into a perilous place, don't they?
Right. Yeah, well, and the timing is going to be critical, because if they do it too early and give Joe Biden enough time to make enough mistakes, then he won't be reelected. So they're going to have to time it just right somehow, if my prediction is correct.
Yeah, I shudder to think what that looks like, though. He can't even handle flying people out of Afghanistan. Nevertheless, getting us involved in a new war. It's just
all right, Vince.
It's just
wanted
amazing.
To throw that out there, man.
Ryan, thanks for the call. I appreciate that. Let me see here. I've got Patrick calling in from Leesburg on line 1. Patrick, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello.
Vince, good afternoon. I hope all is well.
Thank you, sir.
I think it's a trap. China's trying to bleed us. Whoever's behind this, they're trying to bleed us dry. We're going to go in there. We should have gone in there a long time ago. And question for you, didn't we go into Iraq for 9/11, weapons of mass destruction, all that stuff, and clean that out?
That's what it was sold as.
Never go into it? You're right, but Iran has an even worse weapon of mass destruction. I think we've never gone in is because there's serious threats here, and they've always said, hey, go ahead, take over, and we'll come after. We're already here. We're already inside the United States. Open borders.
So you're saying that the reason, your suspicion, your hunch is that the reason we haven't gone to a full-fledged war with Iran is because we're so vulnerable internally, we know that it's going to be bad for us?
Correct. I think it's legit. And just the Axis powers right now. And, these people say death to America all the time.
Yeah, they do. That's for sure. Yeah.
Who's saying death to Iran or death to all, I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, no, these are great questions. And if there's a lesson to be derived from Iraq, it's, we should think through before we jump into a military conflict, whether we're going to like the outcome of it in the end, what kind of vacuum we create, whether we create things like ISIS as the enduring legacy of that decision. There's definitely a lot of obvious adult considerations that need to be made by brains that are much more put together than the guy who's in the Oval Office right now. But to your point about our own security here in the United States, this is a question I ask every day. Every time we talk to anybody who's on a committee for Homeland Security, whether it's in the House or the Senate or anywhere else, what's our security situation? Unfortunately, we don't know the answer, but things are perilous. That's about it, because we have no idea who's even entering the country, Patrick, on a daily basis, including, and we see some things like, hey, that guy was on the terror watch list. But beyond that, how many have made it in that we just have no idea about?
You're right. We don't know. It's a mystery. And the numbers we do get, they're false. It's probably times 3, times 10.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
I go to the airport a lot, and I making small chatter, being friendly, and there's some friendly Iranian people going back and forth, or the Middle East just going back and forth all the time. And who's checking on this?
Yeah, it would just be better to know who's coming into the country. It's like kind of a basic expectation for a normal country with a border and some sovereignty. Remember the good old days? Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate the call. Coming up, we've got a lot more for you. Some details about what's happening in this Biden administration and this guy, Mike Johnson, now Speaker of the House. Who is he? What does he believe in? Got some more on that. And, of course, your calls all ahead on the Vince Coglianese Show. Well, good afternoon to you. It's 5:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Coming up, I've just had such a good pile of all this stuff about the new speaker, Mike Johnson. I want to share so much of it with you. We'll do some of that. Also, of course, taking your calls. Like I said, let's get to Steve calling in from Fairfax on line 4. Steve, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, always enjoy your show. Quick comment or question. Where this is about the protest, campus protest,
yes,
that we're seeing all over the place. Where is DEI? Okay, DEI was supposed to be the answer to incivility, racism, discrimination. Yet this is what we're having from campuses, on campuses from these leftist students, and so given that, DEI has become demonization, exclusion, and intolerance. It's not diversity, equity, inclusion. Everything we're seeing is the exact opposite.
Isn't it? So, it's a big gaslighting exercise. So when you say inclusion, you would think that there'd be some respect for the Jewish students on campus, some consideration for the Israelis who were just murdered in a terror attack. But that's not what you're seeing at all. In fact, the very people who are part of these so-called DEI programs, Steve, are actually on the side of Hamas. They're rooting on the people who are saying that the terrorists were right, that there was something just in the way that they treated those women, children, and Holocaust survivors. Which is exclusion. They want to exclude
Jewish students from being treated normal, being a part of the campus like everybody else. They want to demonize Jewish students, and it's absolute intolerance. That is stark contradiction to these so-called principles of DEI. And I think there are state administrators, DEI administrators, something to that effect, that should be put on notice that DEI is a failure as it is today.
Well, it's all a scam. So earlier this week, you saw. It was last week, I guess this occurred. Coca-Cola has removed Black Lives Matter from its website. They didn't, no statement or anything. They just memory hold it. They used to have this thing about how much money they had given to BLM. And then right after the attack in Israel, what happened? The BLM chapters were all celebrating the attack. You had BLM chapters posting these photos, these cartoons of the paragliders going in to rape and murder women, children, adults, all sorts of people. and BLM endorses that, Coca-Cola just wants it to all go away. They're like, oh, we had nothing to do with that. And so in other words, to your point, Steve, this was all a scam. It was all just a way to cover up the sins were actually coming from the left side of the aisle.
That's right. Yes, that's right. They want to make January 6th their holiday. They're ushering in some memorable moments here with one, these protests, but silence from the left, and actually flipping the protests so that instead of Judaism being the victims, they're actually it's Muslims are being the victims, and it's
demented.
It's demented. Thank you. It really is. It's very twisted.
Yes, it is. Steve, thank you for your call on this. I mean, you're pointing out a horrifying phenomenon that's taking place in the country right now, but it's evident to everybody, to the point that I've had some conversation about this on the show here. A lot of Jewish Democrats, it took them long enough, but they're sitting around going, "What the hell's going on?" Like, hey, you walked into this crap. Now that you're awake, welcome. Let's fix this. Let's just see if we can get this figured out, because you got these crazy campuses where college students and administrators and people, it happened at GW this week, right? Right, on the library wall. They're projecting images on the library wall about how great Hamas is. And you're saying to yourself, George Washington University? You're taking the side of terrorism and tyranny? And then the university releases some mealy-mouthed statement. Well, it wasn't really an authorized protest. How about condemning the people who support terrorism? How about that? Condemning these lunatics. And then fixing your admissions process so lunatics don't rise to the top of the pile, right? I've got some updates for you, too, on this woman in Congress, Rashida Tlaib, who is crazy. She's fully on board with Hamas. Fully on board. In fact, there's a report out this week. Our friends over at Hot Air highlighting this. It's from a group called Canary Mission. They wrote this up. They released a report this week. They did an investigation into Representative Rashida Tlaib, and as Ed Morrissey writes at Hot Air, it's a doozy. Canary Mission primarily investigates anti-Semitism. That's what this group does on college campuses. And they have proven themselves to be credible in the investigations that they do. Ed knows. And they have been able to link Tlaib to a variety of Hamas activists, fundraising, and indirectly to yet another terror organization. This is a sitting member of Congress. Canary Mission can confirm that Rashida Tlaib has extensive fundraising ties to Hamas supporters. She employed no less than 3 Hamas-linked activists to fundraise for her 2018 election campaign, one of whom spent 8 months in prison for his alleged connections to Hamas. So she's got ex-cons, Hamas-connected convicts, who are a part of her campaign activities, fundraising for her 2018 election campaign. Tlaib additionally used a pro-terror Facebook page, pro-terror, called PAC USA, to raise funds for her 2018 congressional campaign. Tlaib gave the founder of this group, PAC USA, the position of chairman of the finance committee for her Rashida Tlaib for Congress campaign. He used it to promote 12 fundraisers in 8 states entirely with her support. In 2015, Tlaib co-founded the Detroit-based anti-American, anti-Israel, and pro-terror hate group Black for Palestine. The number 4 is the middle of that. Black for Palestine. A co-founder used that group to conduct activism with members of the Marxist-Leninist Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the PFLP, which is a designated foreign terrorist organization. They're thick as thieves in Rashida Tlaib's office. Rashida Tlaib, the woman who flies a Palestinian and pride flag outside of her office, right here on Capitol Hill. Tlaib has spent the week lying about deaths in Gaza. Last week, she started advancing this lie, that Israel had struck a hospital, killing hundreds of people in Gaza, all civilians, all innocent. Israel so cruel. Rashida Tlaib used that as a basis to invoke an insurrection, to incite an insurrection at the Capitol this past week, as a number of pro-Hamas lunatics raided the Cannon office building, hung out in the rotunda, screamed their faces off, and were gently, gingerly, politely escorted out of the building by Capitol Police after hours of lunacy and destruction. They marked up the building as well. They put graffiti on the walls. All encouraged by Rashida Tlaib, who is advancing a lie. You know by now that that hospital was actually struck by Palestinian Islamists, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, within Gaza. The hospital building itself wasn't struck. It was the parking lot of the hospital. It wasn't 500 people who died. It was maybe 24. And it was a self-own so obvious that even Hamas members were caught on audio talking to them, talking to each other. Oh, that was one of ours. Oh, that was one of ours. Tlaib to this day is blaming Israel for that, whipping people into a frenzy. Marjorie Taylor Greene, is this today that she did this? Marjorie Taylor Greene has introduced a resolution to censure crazy Rashida Tlaib today. Here she is in a Twitter video making the announcement.
I introduced my censure resolution just a bit ago on the House floor, censuring Rashida Tlaib. Rashida Tlaib is the most anti-Semitic, anti-American, anti-Israel member of Congress, and no member of Congress for the United States of America should hate Israel and hate America. This resolution will be voted on the House floor next week, and I encourage all my Republican colleagues and Democrats to vote to censure Rashida Tlaib.
And on her point about hating Israel and hating America, Tlaib has come out. The reason she's still holding on to this lie about the hospital, she claims, is because the U.S. lies, Israel lies, and therefore I can't believe what I'm hearing. That's her point. That's what she said that. She said she's sticking to the hospital thing because America's lying and Israel's lying. Marjorie Taylor Greene, here she is reading the resolution today on the House floor.
The resolution is as follows. A resolution censuring Representative Rashida Tlaib for anti-Semitic activity, sympathizing with terrorist organizations, and leading an insurrection at the United States Capitol complex.
Yesterday, as Mike Johnson became Speaker of the House, you did have Hakeem Jeffries stand up there and give a speech just before handing him the gavel and accusing Republicans of being awful people and on and on. But in his speech, he said, "We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel," he said. And unfortunately, the C-SPAN cameras or whoever, the congressional cameras, did not turn towards the Democrat conference. I didn't get to see who was standing and who was seated. But my guess is Rashida Tlaib was not enthusiastic about that particular line, and she's not alone. There's a bunch of them in the House. The House yesterday passed a resolution. After Mike Johnson became Speaker, they passed a resolution supporting Israel and condemning Hamas for its unprovoked war on Israel. And it was passed overwhelmingly. Lots of people in Congress supported this on a bipartisan basis. But among the people who didn't, a lot of Democrats. A lot, including Rashida Tlaib. She couldn't condemn Hamas. It was a resolution literally condemning Hamas. She couldn't do it. Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, she couldn't condemn. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez could not condemn Hamas yesterday in this resolution. Cori Bush of Missouri. Jamal Bowman, the criminal, Jamal Bowman, the guy who pulls fire alarms in order to disrupt the lawful activities of Congress. Yeah, they're all against condemning Hamas. One Republican did vote against the resolution. I didn't see his rationale for this. Thomas Massey of Kentucky voted against the resolution yesterday. But this is these Democrats. It's crazy what they have going on in their own party. And then meanwhile, they're casting aspersions to the Republicans are full of extremists. You can't condemn Hamas. You can't condemn beheading babies. That's not possible for you. So that's what's happening there. And then you've got the Speaker, Mike Johnson, who's seems like a good dude. Again, got to hold his feet to the fire, make sure he actually does the job. But here's a little bit from Mike Johnson on, for instance, the border. Imagine if we had one of those.
A lot of my Democrat colleagues throw the phrase around existential threat. It's their favorite word now. You hear it on, related to everything. But this really is an existential issue, a threat for us. And because as we make the point all the time in the House Judiciary Committee, we have jurisdiction over these issues, and we have lots of debates in there, and that very fun committee sometimes. But we try to explain the reality of this. That, if you do not have border security, if you don't have a secure border, then you can't maintain your sovereignty as a nation. I
think in Donald Trump has said some version of this before. If you don't have borders, you don't have a country. It's like very, very plain spoken. Mike Johnson, in his own eloquent way, saying if you do not have border security, then you can't maintain your sovereignty.
That's what this is about. A lot of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they want us to be all just kind of this one world community, sort of this new world order idea. All that sounds great, but it's a fantasy. I mean, we're the most successful, most powerful, most benevolent nation in the history of the world. But we will not be able to maintain that generosity that we export around the world, that we donate to so many countries, we help so many downtrodden people, we defend liberty around the world. We can't do any of that if we lose our sovereignty.
Completely. And it's in a variety of ways. If you have a refugee crisis where you have people illegally migrating to the United States in the hopes of being put on a safety net, well, that burdens the country. So you have to have a rational conversation about to what extent do we do that? How much can we handle? These blue cities right now, all these city leaders, they're all like complaining that they don't have enough money from the federal government. Give us more money so we can handle the illegals. Or as they say, undocumented, or whatever they say. They're overwhelmed. They're completely overwhelmed. Another big one that nobody talks about, but you should, is the cultural implication of importing the entire planet to your country. There's a phrase that used to be kind of okay to use. I don't know. Can we use it still? Assimilation. That's what people used to say. Do you know when people used to immigrate to the country, they would actually name their children things that were accessible to other Americans? They would adopt the naming conventions of the United States of America to make it so that their kid would fit in a little bit better. In other words, they would assimilate. They would try and fit in. And people do that in all sorts of ways. But basically, you want to prepare your kids for success. So you get them to learn English, right? So that they can interact with the world. You get them to become friends with the other kids in the community so that they have a future, right? I mean, how many, do you have childhood friends that you're still in touch with who've improved your life in any meaningful way? Certainly it's true. The wealthier you are, that's a big deal, actually. People have these childhood friendships. They go to these elite schools. They develop these alumni networks and on and on and on. And so assimilating into our country, if you're immigrating here, is kind of an essential component to not only the country holding together, but for all of our collective success. And the only way you can do that is if you have some sense of pacing. You've got to do it over time. It's not something, you can't have a rush of people. It doesn't work that way. Because then your culture becomes overwhelmed. You don't have the ability to assimilate. There's too many things. It's the Tower of Babel. There's too many conflicting things all going on, and the whole thing falls apart. And so a rational country with sovereign borders would moderate the number of people who are coming in to the point that you can take them in and successfully integrate them into society, make it so that they're contributing in a successful way, and that we can all succeed together. That's how you have a sensible immigration system. What we have now is the Tower of Babel. What we have is a full-blown chaotic situation. So when Mike Johnson says the border is an existential threat, stop telling us about the weather. Come on. How decadent can you possibly be? Oh, the seas might rise a quarter of an inch over the next century. Shut up. You have to be insane to think that's the most pressing issue. Our whole country's collapsing. It's like, what bubble do you live in? What Martha's Vineyard can you escape to have this opinion? And guess what happens? The second illegals show up at Martha's Vineyard, they deport them. They know that's a problem. They can't have that. Can't have that. The rest of you, suck it up.
The president views Speaker Mike Johnson as a MAGA extremist.
Look, I would have to let the speaker speak for himself. Obviously, I think he has defined himself as that way.
That's cringe. You see, because if you'd like a border, that makes you an extremist in the eyes of the White House. The great one, Mark Levin, is up next here on WMAL.